The fourth chapter of your Excel IGCSE biology syllabus is cell structure. The first chapter we covered was the classification of living organisms, the characteristics of living organisms. Then your number two was your variety of living organisms. जिसके अंदर हमने five kingdoms को discuss किया था. And the third chapter of your syllabus was levels of organization. And the fourth chapter is now your cell structure. As in the levels of organization, which was our third chapter, हमने उसके अंदर क्या चीजें स्टडी की थी, that what are the different levels of the building organism, that it starts from the cells, and cells build up tissues, tissues build up organs, organs build up organ systems, and then organ systems combine form a organism. तो यहाँ पे भी हम cell structure के अंदर we are just going to talk about cells in particular in detail कि cell का structure क्या है, what are cells made up of, what are the building blocks of a cell, what are the different organelles inside the cell, the differences between plant cell and animal cells, eukaryotic cell, prokaryotic cell, और ये सारी हम चीजें कवर करेंगे. So starting with some of the common cell structures, आपको idea होना चाहिए that what are the basic cell structures that are there present in every cell, whether it's a prokaryotic, bacterial, कोई virus का cell हो गया, कोई protista cell हो गया, single cell, multi cell, plant cell, animal cell. There are some common cell structures that are common in all. आगे जाके yes, they do differentiate at one point when we talk about different organisms, when we talk about different kingdoms, when we talk about different types, the cell structures differ from each other. But right now, at an initial stage, we'll talk about some of the common cell structures that are present, such as we have a cytoplasm, then we have a nucleus, a cell membrane, cell wall, mitochondria, chloroplasts, ribosomes, and vacuoles. Now, what we know about is that cytoplasm kya hai? Cytoplasm is found inside the cell and contains all the other cell structures. The large nucleus is surrounded by a nuclear membrane to separate it from the cytoplasm. So cytoplasm kya hai? It is found inside the cell. Uske andar hota kya? They contain all the other cell structures. Cytoplasm basically acts as a medium that holds all the cell structures, or if I talk more precisely, I'm talking about cell organelles. Cell organelles was one of the levels of organization as well in the previous chapter number 3, jo ke they build up the cells, then cells further build up tissues. So organelles combine form the structure at the basis of a normal cell, whether that's an animal cell or if that's a plant cell. So cytoplasm kahan hai? It is found inside the cell and contains all the other cell structures. So basically एक ocean hai, an ocean where all the organelles are basically floating around. Then we have a large nucleus which is surrounded by a nuclear membrane to separate it from the cytoplasm. फिर हमारे पास एक structure आता है nucleus. Nucleus is one of the largest organelles inside the cell and it is the darkest in color. इसके अंदर एक nucleolus भी होता है. In a nucleus, we have genetic information. अब वो genetic information किस तरह store है? That genetic information is stored in the form of chromosomes. उन chromosomes को link किया हुआ है DNA के साथ, and that whole nucleus is surrounded by a nuclear membrane. अंदर उसके एक nucleolus होता है which is responsible. It is a kind of a brain of the cell and is responsible for controlling all metabolic chemical reactions and entry into and out of the nucleus. Then we have a cell membrane. Now there are three to four other terms used for a cell membrane. Cell membrane is something that surrounds the cell. It's a thin layer which surrounds the cell. Abhi, don't worry, we are going to cover each and every organelle separately. Also, एक slide separate we have for all the basic organelles and common cell structures. Cell membrane ko we also call it the plasma membrane. We also call it selectively permeable membrane or partially permeable membrane. Why do we call it a selectively or partially permeable membrane? Because it differs from a cell wall. Cell wall to kya hai? It is made up of cellulose and surrounds the cell membrane in plants. अब cell wall और cell membrane के अंदर एक बहुत common difference आता है. That cell membrane is basically partially permeable, whereas cell wall is fully permeable, which means cell wall lets everything inside. So cell wall का ये होता है कि it is basically fully permeable, and cell membrane is partially permeable. Partially permeable membrane means that it only allows some substances to enter inside the cell. Not every substance is allowed to enter inside the cell or even exit the cell. Then we have mitochondria. Mitochondria or organelles found throughout the cytoplasm. इसको हम powerhouse of the cell भी कहते हैं. Mitochondria is also known as the powerhouse of the cell. Why is it known as the powerhouse of the cell? Because this is the organelle that supplies energy, and that energy is supplied in the form of ATP. एटीपी एक मॉलिक्यूल होता है जो कि अभी हम आगे स्टडी करेंगे इन ऑल्सो इन चैप्टर नंबर 9 और 10 भी जो आपको रेस्पिरेशन का है। पावर हाउस ऑफ द सेल है जो कि एनर्जी इज क्रिएटेड इन द फॉर्म ऑफ एडिनोसिन ट्राइफॉस्फेट मॉलिक्यूल and this helps in most of the respiral and metabolic reactions of the cell as well. Then we have chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are organelles found in the cytoplasm that are packed with the pigment chlorophyll and so they are green in color. अब chloroplast की ये बात है that is it is only present in plant cells, not an animal cell. What is the reason? And it is one of the basic differences also जो कि help करेंगे. Chloroplasts basically are responsible for the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, we'll be doing this in plant nutrition in a lot of detail. Basically, chloroplasts, they are only present in plants because plants are the only organisms that carry out photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is one of the reactions or the process in which plants make their own food. Now, for photosynthesis, we need sunlight. And to absorb the sunlight, we need a substance known as chlorophyll, which is green in color. This is what gives the plant a green color. जो क्लोरोफिल होती है इसी की वजह से प्लांट को एक ग्रीन कलर मिलता है. Now chlorophyll is the substance that is present in your chloroplast. Chloroplast are small green colored organelles होते हैं. They contain chlorophyll. Chlorophyll helps absorbing the sunlight from the sun, and that sunlight then actually performs the photochemical reaction known as photosynthesis. The term photochemical will be also studied later in the chapter, which means light reactions. Chloroplasts are only present in plants and responsible for photosynthesis. Then we have ribosomes. Ribosomes are tiny structures that can be free within the cytoplasm or attached to a system of membranes inside the cell. Ribosomes क्या होते हैं? ये basically protein synthesis. They are responsible for protein synthesis. यहाँ पे आपके पास protein formation होती है. Now, protein, another very important biological molecule when we talk in terms of cells, in terms of muscle tissue and your whole body. Ribosomes are very important tiny structures and they are found also in each and every cell. ये eukaryotic में भी 80s के types होते हैं and they are found in 70s types in prokaryotes. No need to go into detail. Right now, you should know that they are attached to system of membranes. ये कहाँ पे अटैच्ड होते हैं टू रफ एंडोप्लाज्मिक रेटिकुलम जो कि हम आगे स्टडी करेंगे. राइबोसोम्स का काम क्या है? दे आर रिस्पांसिबल फॉर दे आर एक्चुअली साइट्स फॉर प्रोटीन सिंथेसिस, द प्लेस वेयर द formation of polypeptide chain and proteins actually take place, and they also sometimes live freely inside the cytoplasm as well. Vacuoles. Vacuoles is also one of the common cell structures found in both plants and animal cells and all major types of the cell, whether it's any organism from any kingdom. Now, vacuoles are large vesicles that take up a large part of the interior of plant cells. ये क्या करते हैं? They act as a storage organelle also. They contain water, minerals, enzymes, hormones. इनके अंदर water ही बहुत ज़्यादा quantity में मौजूद होता है. So they are basically large vesicles. Vesicle is a storage carrying molecule होता है. ये just for storage purposes. But yes, they do take up a large part of the cell interior. In front of you, you have two types of cells. One of them is known as typical animal cell and the other is a typical plant cell. Now the thing is that there are some common differences and common similarities as well. For example, अगर हम animal cell को देखें, they both have a nucleus. Obviously, nucleus is the brain of the cell. The nucleus contains the DNA. The nucleus contains the chromosomes. आपकी पूरी जो genetic information है, that is basically present inside the nucleus. Both of them also have a cell membrane, which is the thin layer. The only difference between the cell membrane of the animal cell and a plant cell is that cell membrane is the outermost layer, the first in line outermost layer in the animal cell, and it's the second most outermost layer in the plant cell. क्योंकि first most outermost layer आपके पास जो होती है वो cell wall है in plant cells. Second innermost layer जो है वो cell membrane है. So another thing, that cell wall is present in a plant cell, but there is no cell wall present in animal cell. There is no cell wall present in animal cell. उसके बाद हम बात करें ribosomes की. Ribosomes are also present in animal cell. They are also present in plant cells. Cytoplasm and mitochondria, both of them are present in animals and plant cells. Another difference is that animal cells contain small numerous vacuoles. They contain small numerous vacuoles. Whereas a plant cell, it contains a vacuole, but it only contains one permanent vacuole. Animal cells can the vesicles and they keep breaking down into simpler substances and all, but they are present in animal cells, but in small numerous molecules. Whereas in a plant cell, it is one large permanent vacuole. Another difference is that yes, plant cells have chloroplasts. Plant cells have chloroplasts, whereas there are no chloroplasts in animal cell. Animal cell के अंदर chloroplasts नहीं होते. Why? Because animal cells do not carry out photosynthesis. Chloroplasts and cell wall, both of them are absent from animal cells, but yes, they are present in plant cells. There is another detailed diagram with definition of a typical animal cell. बात की जाए अगर न्यूक्लियस की, nucleus contains all the genetic information to produce new cells and controls all chemical processes that takes place in the cell. It actually acts as a controller inside the cell. Cytoplasm क्या है? ये आपके पास पूरा cytoplasm. The whole surrounding medium where all these organelles are present. This is known as cytoplasm, a jelly-like substance where chemical reactions take place to keep the cell alive. And these reactions are controlled by enzymes. Enzyme we'll be studying in the next chapter, which is your biological molecules. साथ ही when we talk about mitochondria, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell that provides energy. When respiration takes place, where glucose and oxygen are changed into energy. जब भी आपको aerobic respiration का reaction होता है, which we will be studying in the upcoming chapters, energy is produced in the form of ATP. और ये सारा कहाँ पे हो रहा होता है? Inside the mitochondria. Talking about cell membrane, I told you it is the outermost layer, the first outermost layer in the animal cell, and it's the second most outermost layer in the plant cell. Plant cell के अंदर जो first outermost layer है वो cell wall है. Animal cell do not have a cell wall. They only have cell membrane as their most outermost layer. This is the thin skin around the cell, and it gives the cell its shape and controls what passes in and out of the cell. That is why this cell membrane is also known as selective cell membrane. It is selective towards some substances and doesn't let everything enter inside the cell. Here we have another diagram of a plant cell. A plant cell के अंदर there are two additional structures. One of them is a cell wall, which was absent in animal cells, and the second structure is chloroplast, which was again absent in the animal cell. Chloroplast की बात करें तो these contain a green pigment called chlorophyll, which absorbs sunlight so the plants can carry out photosynthesis. अब chloroplast का काम क्या होता है? That they all have a green pigment which is known as a chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the green pigment that provides the whole leaf and the plant with the dark greenish color. Chlorophyll ही sunlight absorb करती है, so the photochemical reaction photosynthesis can actually take place and the plant can make its own food. Cell wall की बात करें, now cell wall is the first outermost layer in animal cell, in plant cell, sorry, और जो cell membrane थी, this is the second most outermost layer, क्योंकि पहले आपके पास cell wall आती है, then you have cell membrane as your second most outermost layer. तो cell wall क्या है? This covers the thin cell membrane and is made of a tough cellulose. Cellulose is one of the polysaccharide. We'll be doing this in biological molecules, your next chapter number 5 of Adexal IGCSE biology. It is made up of tough polysaccharide cellulose. Cellulose is a molecule, a biological molecule, a type of a polysaccharide which gives the plant cell strength and support. अब याद रखें, the material of the cell wall is different in all organisms. For example, we'll be studying this in detail also when we'll talk about cell wall in a separate lecture only. The cell wall inside a bacteria is made up of peptidoglycan chain, whereas cell wall in fungi, ठीक है, fungus जो हमने fungi kingdom पढ़ा था in the second chapter, in fungi the cell wall is made up of a material known as chitin, whereas in plants the cell wall is made up of cellulose. So plants में, fungi में and bacteria, all three of these organisms contain different types of cell wall. उनका जो building material of the cell wall है, that is basically different. Peptidoglycan chains in bacteria, cellulose in plants, and chitin in fungi. Baki, we have talked about nucleus already. We have already talked about cell membrane in the previous slide. We have also talked about mitochondria and cytoplasm. Vacuole की बात करें अगर यहाँ पे, Now we know, I'm not saying that vacuole is absent in animal cells. No, it is present, but they are very small and numbers of numerous vacuoles present there. Plant cell की बात करें, plant cells have a large permanent vacuole, which is filled with a weak solution of salt and sugar cell sap. ये क्या होता है वैक्यूल मैंने बताया इट्स अ काइंड ऑफ ए स्टोरेज ऑर्गेनेल यहाँ पे क्या क्या है नाउ दिस वैक्यूल कंटेन्स अ वीक सॉल्यूशन ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड शुगर्स एंड दैट सॉल्यूशन इज कॉल्ड एज सेल सैप नाउ दिस वैक्यूल गिव्स द सेल सपोर्ट क्योंकि इसका इतना लार्ज साइज होता है इट इज ऑलमोस्ट कवरिंग 70% ऑफ द सेल्स इंटीरियर जो आपका सेल का इंटीरियर है दैट इज 70% ऑक्युपाइड बाय दिस लार्ज वैक्यूल and this is only there in the plant cell. ये आपके पास जो large permanent vacuole है, this is only present in a plant cell. Animal cells के अंदर there are small numerous vacuoles known as small vesicles present throughout the cell. So if we overall look at the difference between a plant and animal cell and then we'll end this lecture as well. Next lecture में हम लोग ये वाला chapter complete कर लेंगे. We'll be talking about each and organelle separately. Now if we overall differentiate between an animal cell and a plant cell. तो पहला difference क्या था that there is a cell wall present in plant cell which is absent in animal cells. ठीक है, then there are small numerous vacuoles in animal cells and there's a large central vacuole in a plant cell. Then we also talked about that chloroplast is present in plant cell which is again absent in an animal cell. तो अगर हम इसको एक tabulated form में देखें, the difference between plants and animal cells. In animal cells, we know that there is no cell wall present, whereas in plant cells, we know that the cell wall is made up of the material cellulose. याद रखें बैक्टीरिया में पेप्टिडोग्लाइकन से बनता है, फंजाई में काइटिन से बना होता है और cell wall in plants is made up of cellulose. So animal cells have no cell wall, whereas plant cells have a cell wall. ये तो आपका हो गया first difference. The second difference is that in animal cells, no central permanent vacuole is present. Many small, numerous temporary vesicles may be present inside the cytoplasm. Whereas in a plant cell, only one large central permanent vacuole is present and no temporary vesicles are present. मतलब कि यहाँ पे permanent vacuole होता है and that is only one large central permanent vacuole. Whereas over here we have numerous small vesicles called vacuoles. इसके बाद the third difference is that animal cells do not have a chloroplast. Why? Because we do not carry out photosynthesis. Humans, animals, mammals, birds, insects, हम सारे क्या हैं? We do not carry out photosynthesis because we can eat our own food. जबकि plant cells, chloroplasts are present because they contain the pigment chlorophyll needed for photosynthesis. So the plants can make their own food. इसके अलावा ये भी एक टेबल है प्लांट सेल्स हैव अ फिक्स शेप large central vacuole cell wall and chloroplast whereas animal cells don't have a fixed shape no large central vacuole no cell wall and no chloroplast and this is all for today